So we were talking about 3D printing. That was the last vlog. A lot of channels have been asking this question because the tech is here. Given how Games Workshop treats their customers and the fact that it is a physical product of models, printing up 3D models. Yes or no? The tech is here. Now, I don't have any 3D printed models. I respect copyright and IP law. I'm not condoning any of that. I'm just reporting on it. I'm just asking the question saying, as a 40K enthusiast, this is where we are. I think this is a bigger threat for Games Workshop than most people realize. It certainly is a bigger threat that I realized until recently, seeing some pieces printed. Again, I don't own any, and I support that. But seeing that, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I think it's a much bigger threat. It's here. Games Workshop needs to counter it. So how do we counter this? The fact that Games Workshop sells these little toys. It's a toy company. Yeah, we have some rules, but it's a toy company. How do we deal with that? How do they counter the 3D printing, especially the duality of not only the tech that makes it possible, but the file sharing that makes it possible? In a year, are we going to get to the point? Or we're here now, right? I mean, you tell me, we're here now. I zap up a whole army. Here we go. Especially if it's a smaller model elite army. Zap up my $20 Titan. I mean, here we go. How does Games Workshop counter that threat? Now, it seems the way they counter it is just hammer everything and say you can't use this at certain events and really go after things as aggressively as possible. I mean, they have to do that. I get that. But my two thoughts were short-term and long-term. And this is coming from the perspective of a 40K enthusiast who has been playing for some time. Short-term, raise prices on everything. So that $40 set of 6 models, raise it to 60, raise it to 80. There is a segment of the player base that does not have access to 3D printing and will not have access to 3D printing. Run the internal numbers. I don't know what those numbers would be, but figure out how much you can jack up the prices to make up for the losses of 3D printing while you go after 3D printing and file sharing. I mean, you have to do that. So short-term, jack up prices. Long-term. Now I'm going to go to Blackstone Fortress for a second here. Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress. When I jumped into that, the models were fantastic. Yes, they were simplified push-fit models. They were not multi-pose. You're not going to customize anything, but they're really good. The models combined with the production value of the tiles for the fortress, the cards, the artwork, the rule books, even though they were kind of flimsy stapled, the artwork in there. Blackstone Fortress was an experience in a box. If Games Workshop includes with their miniatures, with their models, this is, in my opinion, the long-term solution. Premium content that's included that cannot be 3D printed. Changing 40K perhaps where you have your unit. So I have my Space Marines, Primaris, and I'm just kind of reaching out there. If also what was included were some cards to utilize certain aspects in the game with artwork, or not that we want to complicate 40K and add more pieces, or certain premium things that are included with it, artwork or special tokens or special markers included with it. And it could be cardboard. It could be lower end printed stuff, but make it look really good. If you integrate that into the game, yes, there are people that'll be able to print that stuff off. Yes, there'll be ways around that, but that I think gets around some of the 3D printing where people will say there's these other components that I can't replicate to that look. I want to be in with that look. I want to utilize it in the game. Having that premium part, I think that's where Games Workshop can counter that. The counter to that counter is I play X-Wing miniatures, still play it very aggressively. Most of my love is in 1.0. I made a limited jump to the new system, but I can print up all the conversion stuff. I can utilize that. I didn't because, again, mostly I play 1.0 fan-based for tournament stuff. My list is very focused, and I don't need that. So I use that as an example of, with that switch, if Games Workshop went premium components included with a unit, then, yeah, people will just print it up black and white and utilize it and kit bash it and hobby it. But I think that's the long-term. You lose a little bit there, but I think that is the long-term solution to at least starting to counter 3D printing. And of course, the long-term cash flow solution, Warhammer Plus. Turning Games Workshop into a media company where they're still going to make it off their miniatures and their toys, but they're selling the rights to media and games and other aspects. That's where the long-term money is, because 3D printing more and more is here. 3D printing is going to happen more and more. Games Workshop, no matter how aggressive they are, you can't stop that tide. And I've seen it. Again, I'm just reporting on it. I'm not condoning it. Got to protect IP, got to respect that. I don't have any 3D printed models, but I've seen that. And I'm like, wow. So from that perspective, your thoughts on what GW can do to counter it, what GW can do as a company, and I guess also asking other aspects. How do other miniature-based companies begin to deal with that? Or the board gaming community. Look, we're going to get 3D printed board game stuff soon. I know it's not Descent 3rd edition. The new Descent, it's app-based. If I zap up all the miniatures, and I zap up the dice, and I take my my molds and I make the dungeon and stuff, then what do I need Fantasy Flight for to play the game? We'll zap that stuff up. I mean, I think it's coming to the board gaming community and the board gaming industry also. I think it's just a little bit behind because it hasn't been aggressively pushed yet and forced like Games Workshop. It's still reasonable to pay $60 for a board game just on convenience and to have the cards and the components and everything there. You jack that board game up to $200, $300, $400, $500, then people are really going to look and say, especially if it's app-based, you know what? I'll 3D print the miniatures myself. I think that's coming down the pipeline also. But focusing on miniatures, how does that adapt and how does that begin to change?